Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. This channel is dedicated to finding out whether I really do know it all or not. Make sure you like and subscribe, and make sure you ask questions in the comments or at my email address, and I will be super happy to answer them. Without further ado, let's get to today's question. Drum roll, please. Okay. This is topical, at least for when this video was made. The question is the Cybertruck a good idea, and will it be successful? Ooh, it's a two-parter. I can answer the second half much easier than the first half. Will it be successful? Actually, I can answer anything I want to right now, and I'll be correct, right? So I will say yes, it will be successful. I don't know exactly what kind of metrics you want to use for that, but you'll also probably have to tune back into this video in, say, 2 years, like the end of 2021 or something like that, to see whether it's become successful. I believe it will be successful, mostly because I don't think that Tesla has like outrageous goals for it. So if you mean success by what their internal expectations are, then sure. I also honestly think it's going to be successful in the sense that it's going to kind of change the perception, the public perception of what a truck actually is. And that's kind of a cool thing, you know. One of the interesting things was that when Elon Musk did the introduction of the Cybertruck, he showed like a history of the truck from, I think, you know, when Ford was building trucks back in the early 20th century, all the way up till now. And they really look very, very similar throughout that entire range. But the Cybertruck is looking at it more from first principles. It's thinking about the truck, you know, without taking account of all of the legacy aspects of it. And just the fact that it's not built on a frame, but the body itself is the frame, is a really fascinating aspect of it. My son pointed out to me the other day, we were talking about the Cybertruck, interestingly enough, and he was pointing out to me the fact that it might actually be a really major road hazard, because one of the things about having aluminum tops to things and having a frame on a body is that there's a lot of development of the whole engine area and the crumple zone that's built. And it will be interesting to see how Tesla deals with that issue, because it's going to be a 6,000 pound-ish truck, and it's made out of massive steel, right? The entire frame is effectively the body shape. And I'll throw a graphic up here of, you know, what it looks like. I'm sure you've seen it before. But anyway, it's going to be an interesting question of, like, how are they going to make that a safety thing? How are they going to deal with the fact that you've got this massive truck and the front of it needs to crumple to be effective safety-wise? Now, on the other hand, to give Tesla credit for all of this, they have the highest safety ratings, I believe, for like the Model S and the Model 3 are the two most highly rated cars for safety. So clearly they know what they're doing, and clearly they're going to think about this, but it is an interesting aspect that I had not thought about. I had not pondered that before. So anyway, to go back to the first half, is the Cybertruck a good idea? Wow. Okay, so this is going to get into design to some extent, and that's something I am certainly not an expert in, although you could say I'm not an expert in anything, really. I'm just happen to be an amateur at everything. But so I can give you my response to that, I guess, and with some backing up of data, because I have looked at other people's thoughts about this also. And so I obviously will be taking some cues from that as well. But I think the way to look at this is, when I first looked at the truck, when they, you know, had the video, I didn't watch the video itself, but I saw pictures of it after it was released, and I was like, oh gosh, WTF, right? It's like, what is this thing? It looks straight out of Ridley Scott's Blade Runner from the early 1980s. You know, it's like these very long and not curved sides. It kind of looks like one of those things that they could just take like a shape and stick it on top of an existing car for like a special effect in an old style movie. And it looks a little ridiculous, right? And then one of the interesting aspects of it is that the more you look at the thing and then seeing it driving around in promotional videos and so forth, you start going like, you know, this actually isn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. This is kind of an interesting design. And then you start thinking about the advantages of this truck. The fact that it starts at $40,000 US, which is around the same price as a Model 3. I know supposedly $35,000 exists out there, but I think it's kind of a unicorn. But I think to get into a Model 3 more or less right now is about $40,000 also. So you're getting a hell of a lot more car for the same price-ish. And then, of course, even the most expensive version is $70,000, which has got like 3 motors, I believe, and, you know, ridiculous range and towing capacity and so forth. So it has a lot of things going for it. I still think it's ugly as sin, but, you know, such is life. I may not think that in a couple of years. One of the interesting things about design is that design has a kind of a good design is sort of self-sustaining or self-fulfilling or world-changing. I don't know, however you want to look at that. But like, if you look at something that looked ridiculous at a certain time, like when it came out, it was so radical that people said, no way, this is ridiculous. But over time, it changes everyone's mind, and then people start going like, oh, this isn't so bad. And then people go, oh, the other stuff that used to be made, right, that other previous design is not so good anymore, and everyone starts drifting towards the newer design. Certainly you can see that with the shape of vehicles. Into the 1980s, it was all very flat-sided and so forth. In the 1950s, they were doing steel with very curvy shapes and all. Made super heavy cars, but as Japan sort of became competitive in the 70s, everyone was making very, very lightweight bodies for cars because they're just shells that stick on top, right? You know, you've got the whole frame that's all the actual working as elements of the car. And so they just make these things cheaply, really, really cheaply, and they were very flat. I happened to be watching First Blood last night, the original Rambo movie, and the cars in there from 1982 are just like all these very, very flat, boxy looking cars, which interestingly enough is kind of like what the Cybertruck looks like now. But what happened was throughout the 80s and especially into the 90s was that manufacturing techniques got better, and people were able to press these lightweight aluminum frames into really interesting shapes, and then of course add plastics to them and so forth. And now of course curvy cars are all the thing. That's the expectation of it. And there are aerodynamic advantages to that and so forth. Also, so there are advantages, and, you know, design follows the necessity for better gas mileage and all, but design is also something that is a public perception. And since everybody else was making curvy cars, everybody else makes curvy cars, you know, so one after another. I think Mercedes was one of the last car companies that really caught on to that. They're a very kind of conservative car, and even relatively recently, like a decade or so, they were making very boxy looking cars by today's standards. And now I don't even recognize Mercedes anymore. They're very curvy and very, you know, BMW-ish. So it's very interesting. So that's an aspect of design. So design-wise, we'll have to wait and see again whether it's a good design. But I think that it has the potential to change people's minds about what a good-looking truck is. And that's cool, right? And if it does change people's minds, then suddenly Tesla's at the forefront of this, right? They're riding the wave instead of being crushed by it. And that's pretty cool in its own right. The other aspect of this is not really design, it's the question of engineering and what's going on inside the truck. Now, of course, those are intimately related. But is this a well-designed car? I haven't driven in one, but I will hazard a guess that it is a very well-designed car. It is an electric car, and certainly there is no question that that's where the world is going to. They're going to electric cars. Things have to go that direction. The internal combustion engine, if you take the entire chain from digging the stuff out of the ground to refining the fuel to to shipping it everywhere that you have to ship it via trucks, right, and trains, and then getting it in your gas tank and then burning it at a low efficiency rate. Gas is just not a very efficient engine. Now, it has a massive energy density, right? Once you get it in the gas tank, it's pretty amazing what you can do with that. But the efficiency of the entire chain from in the ground to burning it and producing all that extra heat is not very efficient. And so what the electric car gives you is a much, much more efficient chain. It has a much lower power density in terms of the batteries that are inside the car, so you just can't take it as far. And also you have to spend longer charging it up than you would filling up a gas tank. But it's coming down, right? So those kinds of things are becoming competitive. Also, the internal combustion engine has had a really amazing run of well over 100 years of manufacturing. It's a very mature technology. It's basically at the end of life. It's gotten about as far as it can go, whereas the electric engine is just ramping up. So the costs are coming down, efficiencies are going up, the actual car itself is becoming better and better. And it's not going to take that long. I think it's projected to be just a couple of years before there's a price parity between ICE, internal combustion engines, and electric engines. And once that crosses, the electric engine is going to keep going down and the internal combustion engine is going to stay the same because they have nowhere else to go. They've pretty much tapped out all the efficiencies out of that engine. So where does that leave that? Well, that means that Tesla in general is a good company to get behind because they're manufacturing the cars of the future, not the cars of the past. But this car in particular is really interesting, especially at the price point. Now, it's a really heavy car, so I expect it will cost a lot more to fuel up, as in plugging in and getting the power out of it. It'll probably have a much larger battery than like a Model 3. But it's a pretty useful looking car. It can seat 6 people. It has, I think, a 6 or 6.5 foot bed. So you can fit a lot of stuff in the back of the truck. The back comes down. They might eventually have solar panels for it, which will actually cause it to charge up. In fact, I know they will. They've announced that they're going to. But even without that, the back cover, when you're not using it as, you know, holding a motorcycle or something big like that, then you've got a lot of covered space for a huge amount of luggage or whatever else if you're traveling. So it's a very interesting car in terms of being utilizable for many different purposes, which is one of the reasons why pickup trucks are very popular in the United States, at least, is because you can utilize them for many different purposes. And since gas is relatively inexpensive in this country, then people are willing to do it. Now, I know that in most other countries around the world, pickup trucks are not nearly as popular because gas is so much more expensive that a pickup truck form factor is just too expensive to drive because it costs too much to fill up the tank. Now, if the Cybertruck becomes a reasonably priced car to, again, fill up with electricity, whatever it ends up costing you to plug it in and generate that power, that's interesting. You know, suddenly the rest of the world might decide that they like pickup trucks too. And if that happens, then think about it, because then your design is a first mover in other places rather than being a last mover and trying to catch up with a very well-established industry. I think there's a huge amount of upside for Tesla, and I'm very interested to see where the Cybertruck is going to put them. Certainly, in order to compete in the US car market, they really had to produce something like the Cybertruck. They didn't have to produce the Cybertruck, but they had to produce a pickup truck of some variety. But I give them a lot of kudos for attempting to do something different and not just repeating the same thing that everybody else did. Because how easy would it have been to build a Ford F-150, put a bunch of batteries underneath the back deck, and just decide that that was the end of it and they were done? But they didn't. They really kind of went back to first principles and they built a car that doesn't have a frame. The body is the frame. It's got a lot of very interesting features, and I think it'll be a very popular car. So we can revisit this in a couple of years, but for now I'm going to give myself that. I think it's going to be good. I think it's a good idea, and I think it's going to be successful. So there you go. That's my answer. So make sure you like and subscribe to this channel for more of this, and also definitely make sure you ask questions in the comments below or at DrKnowItAllKnows@gmail.com. My wife ferrets out the good questions and she asks me the questions, and I riff on it and I see how we do. Until next time, thanks so much.